get the our ability to hold down the right mouse button and pan around working. So there's a function that's going to be called on mouse move, and where you get that from is in your, so on the custom viewport control, if you go up to override, and I have it over here, but you'll have it in this list, so it'll be on mouse move. If you click that, you will get the override function here, and you can double click that and you'll be in here. So what are we going to do? So off of our mouse event, we can get the cursor data, or delta, I should say. So that's the amount that's changed since the last time it read. And you can split that vector, and we're going to grab and set these two values. So we're going to set promote one to current mouse X position, and promote the other one to a variable for current mouse Y position. And you can set those. The other thing from the mouse event we want to find out is is the mouse button down, is it being pushed, and which mouse button. So if you can click the little keyboard here, left click it, and then if you do a right click, it'll set it to right mouse button. And that'll be the same, that's kind of the same as the main editor adjustment or movement. And so from that, we can test, or we can set my right mouse button down. So promote that to a variable, because we're going to use that again a few times. Maybe. Yeah, I think so. So now we have two values. One was entered. Remember, we captured that right off the front. Event graph, on mouse enter and on mouse leave, right? So we set that Boolean there. And then our right mouse button down. So if both of those are true, in other words, we're over top of the viewport and we've got the right mouse button down, then we want to do something. And what we're going to do is we're going to call this freeform movement function that we're going to define. So right now you can just create a new function and call it freeform movement if you want, or call it whatever you like, and give it an input of delta time. And that's the one that we captured again off that initial tick event. And so you can plug that into here. And the return value out of this is unhandled, because, and things might have changed, because when I first watched this video, the guy did it for just when 5.0 first came out, and he set these to handled, and his was working. I tried that and it doesn't work. So unhandled, I guess that kind of allows the mouse information to continue. So that is that for our on mouse move. So now let's double click and go into freeform movement. We'll go through that one. It's oh no, we're not going to go in there yet. We're going to also set up some keys. So another way that we move around in here is if I hold down I'm holding down the right mouse button, and if I push the W key, well, it's hard to tell right now because there's nothing in the screen, but I'm barely moving around the screen, I think. Right? So if I go to the actual utility of it, and if I move around, if I put something in the screen so that we can see it, the W, S, D, and A, W, A, S, D, right? It lets us move around. So for those ones, we're going to use on key up and on key down. So again, those are two function overrides that you can get into this list here. They'll be somewhere under on key something something. Here they are, on key up and on key down. So let's do on key down first, because that seems to be the more understandable one. So on key down, the key event, coming off the key event, we get the key. And what we want to do is come off of it and just do an equals. And then you can, click the little keyboard here and push W and you'll get the equals W. And similar ASMD. So for W, so if it's W, and then you can make this waterfall of branches. So if it's not, it's this one, it's not, it's that one, so on and so forth. So if it's W, we're going to set a Boolean value of W key. So it's a value that a variable that you can create. So we got W, A, S, and D key Booleans. And we're going to set them for each different case here to be true. And then we're going to return, and we're going to say that it's been handled. Okay. So that's key down, key up. Well, it's basically exactly the same, except that we are making them false, and we are handling that event. Okay, so that's key up and key down. And so now if we go to freeform move, we've got all of our components ready and needed. So the first one we're going to start with, it's going to be a waterfall situation here. So we're going to start with the keys first. So we're going to look at the W key. And so the W key basically makes us move forward. So if we look at the viewport, and we're going to get its rotation, we're going to get its forward vector, right? So we know which way we're supposed to move. And then I created a variable here called move speed so that you can, maybe adjust this, maybe tie it into the scroll wheel or something like that if you want to be able to adjust how fast you can move. Right now, I just hard-coded mine to a value of, I think, 200 on all vectors. So we got this forward vector. I guess I could have just multiplied it by a single float, but yeah, that's probably a better thing to do. So we multiply that, and we're going to multiply that by our delta time, our input delta time. So we have a certain amount in the one frame click that went by that we're going to move in the forward vector. And then we're going to take that location, or that distance, and we're going to add it to the viewport location, and that'll be our updated location if W was true, right? And so if W was not true, we're going to test against the S key. Well, the S key is the negative of this. So it's this exact same thing. So we can come off this same pin, but this time we're going to take the viewport location and we're going to subtract it. And we're going to stuff that location into our viewport if the S key was true. So that handles moving in and moving out. So similarly, we're going to look at the D key and the A key. The D key being our right vector. So that's what we're going to look at. That's the defined one that we can grab. So again, from our viewport, we're going to get the view rotation. We're going to get our right vector. We're going to multiply it by our move speed. We're going to multiply that by our delta time. So we got our incremental bit that we've moved in to the right. We're going to get our view location from our viewport. We're going to add it to that. And if the D key is true, we are going to move to the left. One thing that just to draw your attention to is that waterfall from the W from W and S. Remember to connect the faults off of S into our D key, but also to continue out of the set location of the true side into here as well. Otherwise, you'll get truncated movements if you push one or and then not the and then you'll have to it buggers it up. So that's the D key. A key is exactly the same thing. So off that same, I'm sorry, I'm just zooming all over the place. Off that same pin here, we want to do a subtraction, and we're going to subtract our view key, our view location. So when we push A, we move to the left. Waterfalling off of that, we are going to set the view rotation of the viewport. So this gets into the mouse movement now, because the keys are moving us, are translating us around, and the mouse is orbiting us around. So we can start with, we'll start by adjusting our rotation pitch. That's about the Y. So that's kind of tilting our head back and left, or left and right. So we'll grab our viewport. We can get our view rotation. We can split that rotator out. X we're going to just pass straight through because we're not rolling. In this case, we're going to let the yaw pass right through. We're only going to worry about the Y value change. So we're going to grab our cursor mouse Y position that we captured previously. We're going to invert it just so that we're in a more sensical sense that we're used to. So multiply that by -1, or leave it as +1, and if that's what you prefer. And then so that will adjust our pitch rotation. And then the next one, we're going to use our X position, and that's going to adjust our yaw. So exactly the same setup, except this time we're passing our X through and our Y through, and we're getting our Z, and we're taking our mouse X position. We're going to add to the Z and input that as our Z yaw for our viewport view rotation. And following that, so that's following that. Now I'm curious. I don't remember these being here. So let's look at, we now need to update our view location and our view rotation. Oh, we've got to move. That's right. So right now, all we've done is we've set our viewport view and location, right? But we haven't set our render target and our camera. So now we can set our current view location, right? So this is another function that we create, or that you can make here. So set current view location. It's very similar to set default location, but it's a little simpler because the viewport has already been set. So we can set its location, and then we're going to just set the actor for the scene capture and our camera to that location. And then similarly, after that's completed, now we can set the current view rotation. So we're going to get our viewport rotation, and we're going to add that or assign that into our scene capture rotation and our camera actor rotation. So now with that, you should be able to look around. The sliding side to side is almost impossible to see. At one point in time, I did have a default cube spawned in here, but I got rid of it because it was just an unnecessary item. And so, yeah. So that concludes the creation of the custom viewport control. And so now you can go back into your icon maker. There's a whole bunch of stuff to do in here yet. But in the designer, you can now, in your user created list, you will find your custom viewport, and you can drag it down and put it inside this second vertical box. And the only thing is adjusted here is just to fill it horizontally and vertically, and that's about it. Okay, so you should have a form that's more or less laid out like this. You are probably going to take a little bit of time monkeying with getting these things ordered in the right spots or in spots that you want, and playing with different visibility settings and paddings and colors and everything else. You can twiddle several hours away doing that. Um, but it should be functional at this point. It should be created at this point. It's not going to be functional yet because we haven't put anything into the graph to speak of, other than, oh, that's the other thing. So when I come back, we will go through and finish creating our different items here. Okay, so let's continue. We have our icon maker. We've got the design laid out. You should be happy with whatever form you've got. And let's add to some of the graph. So starting back over at the top, we had the pre-construct. We did that set form size. We talked about that already. This one I don't think we talked about. This is excuse me, the setup details. That's that little detail panel that is down here, right? That's this little viewport panel. So that's what I called setup details. It should be a variable. So if you drag it in and you pull off of it, you can set the object. And what that means is it wants to know, well, what details of what object should I be getting? And so it's of this, basically, so of the self. So just get a reference to self here, just type self, and get a reference to self and stuff it in there. So it says, oh, okay, this is the one. Okay. Event construct, we did our set form size. We talked about update tile list because that was our list object, right? We went through this already, our for loop and everything else. And then I created a path or a string. I called it my save icon path, and I'm just setting it at this point to a default value. And I called mine game. Remember the first initial slash as well? Game, assets, icon textures, and an ending slash. Okay. There was our refresh button for our tile list, right? So that was an easy one. So all we did was that was for this refresh collection button. So there's not much to do that because we've already wrote that function there. We're just recalling it again. So when we select, so this is, I don't think no, we didn't go through any of this. No. So this is for our tile view. So when we select one of the items in our tile view, what should we do? So if you select your tile view and come down and you click on your on item clicked event, right? You'll get this function created. Now, For me, I'm dealing with static meshes and skeletal meshes. So I'm grabbing the item that's been selected and I'm casting it to a static mesh. And if that fails, I'm going to cast it to a skeletal mesh. If that fails, I'm not doing anything. So we'll go through if static mesh is successful. So first of all, I promote it to a variable and I called it custom mesh. I grabbed my custom viewport that we've added and we would have clicked it to be a variable, so it shows up here. Inside of it, we grabbed the display mesh. That was our variable that was inside that we defined there. And from that, we want to get the static mesh component. This should have all been set before, now that I'm looking at this again. But that doesn't hurt it to be set to be movable again. I might remove that. And then we're going to scoot over to here. Well, I guess the skeletal mesh, I want to zero out its skeletal mesh component um, if we're doing this one. So we'll we'll do that as well. But what I really want to do is that static mesh component, I want to set the static mesh component to the custom mesh that we just set here. So in other words, the one that we just clicked on. We're going to call on our custom viewport. We're going to call our set default view location and set default view rotation. So those will be functions that live on the custom viewport. And then I want to capture a variable for a mesh name. So what I did was I took my custom mesh and I get the display name, this one. And then from that, you can get the string value. And so we can set our mesh name because we want to be able to title our file later. So if the static mesh fails, and we're going to then see if it's a skeletal mesh. If it is a skeletal mesh, we're going to set the skeletal mesh. I set the mobility, and again, since those were set before, I don't know if I had to do that again. Oh, sorry. So from our custom viewport, the display skeletal mesh variable, and getting the skeletal mesh component. Set its mobility. It was set already. I think I can delete that. And here I want to set the skeletal mesh asset to the one that we just selected. And so this is where, otherwise, if we don't clear it, right? So here the next step here is I set my static mesh, because if we had static meshes selected up here, it would show up here now, and here's where I can clear it. If I don't clear it, we could end up having static meshes and skeletal meshes at the same time, which, you know what, maybe that's something that you might want. You might want to be able to blend two items together, and that could be an option that you could further develop. Anyways, so we set the skeletal mesh. I clear my static mesh, and previously I cleared my skeletal mesh, and then I did the static mesh. You know what I'm doing. And then on the viewport, we can set the default view location and set the default view rotation. And then I'm creating, or I'm setting the mesh name, again, the same variable for my skeletal mesh from the display name of my skeletal mesh. So that's what happens when we click a button or click an item in our list view. So when we change, okay, so that's if we look back to our designer, so that gets the functionality of this control working. The button was pretty straightforward. This button or this control set is a little bit different. So when these values change, I just noticed that I need to fix one of these. When these values change, how do we capture that? So we come in here, and so there's oh, let me go back. On that control, if you scroll down, there's an event on property change. So if you select that, we can call into this delegate. And so the property name, so what property name do you want to do something to? So one is my Boolean use background. And so if it's equal, then I'm going to um, check my value of use background, right? Because the value is going to be instantly changed when we click it. And so it's going to be either true or false. So if it's true, so if use background is true, we want to set the primitive render mode to render scene primitives. In other words, it's going to render the background as well as our object. It's going to render everything that it can see. The target of that render is going to be our custom viewport, our scene capture 2D, our capture component 2D from that. So that'll be the target on it. If use background is false, which is our default, because I want to generally have a transparent background, we only want to use our show only list. And so that'll be that flip-flop. So the other property that we have in there is the background, the actual texture background that we've exposed, right? So again, if that is true on that condition, so if it is if the property that changed is the property that we've called background, if that's true, then I want to set the texture parameter value. So on the custom viewport, the dynamic material background variable that we promoted and created, that'll be the target. And I want to change the parameter name. This is what you called that texture parameter object on the material background texture. And I want to give it the value of background. So that's the back value of that texture cube. Now I noticed that I also have this save icon path, which I don't have in here. So I'm going to do that right now. So off of this property name, I'm going to go equals. And the value that I want to do is save icon path. And so if that is an item that is actually changing, get some clean up here. If that's true, then I'm going to come off into a branch. And I came off of that fall. I got a waterfall off of this false. And only one of these would ever change at once because you can only click so fast, right? So if that's true, what do I want to do? Well, I want to change. I want to get this value. I'm going to copy that. Well, I can just go like this. Pull this out, and I want to set this to, I want to set that to itself. Does that make sense? Maybe that's why I didn't have to do this. When I change it, when I change it, it's only changing on the control. No, I don't know. I'm going to not do this, and we're going to try it. Let's see what happens. So I'm going to run my widget here. I got a guy, and I'm going to change this to texture test. Okay. And we'll make that. And if I swoop over into here, assets, texture test, well, it made the stuff, so apparently it updates automatically. It might be, oh, I'm having a deja vu here. It might have to do with that it's one and the same. So anyways, I'm going to get rid of that. I don't need to do this. Probably why I didn't do it. Yeah, I don't know why. I guess we're setting things that are beyond the control itself. That makes more sense. Okay, good. That wasn't crazy. So that's looking back at our control thing. So that finishes off the left-hand side. Um, now there's whatever's going on over here. So what do we do with that? Well, the only other button I've got left here is because the viewport is just doing its thing, right? It's its own control that looks at stuff and you can span and move around. It really comes down to this button that does the make item or make icon. So looks like we got 3 steps. First step is we want to get our custom viewport and get the scene capture component and capture the scene. Ta-da! We got it. Second step, we get our mesh name. I'm appending a T underscore because we're creating a texture. And I'm appending the icon save path or the save icon path with this at the end, right? And so from that capture component, now that it's captured the scene, uh, it captures the scene into the texture target. And so that texture target, we want to then create a static texture from it. In other words, we want to be able to write it to disk. And so when we're going to name it as we built here, we've got no map set, and we're going to set the user interface type to user interface or the compression settings to user interface. I output it as a variable. I promoted it. I don't know exactly. I guess I use it somewhere else. So output it as a variable, and I set its texture group to UI. One more setting that we can set. And then we want to save the loaded asset. And that's just a straight up function that you can just call save loaded asset. And leave this to be false because we want to save it no matter what. If it's not dirty or not, we're going to just save over. And so that's going to be our output texture. We're going to save it. So that gives us our texture. The next step is we're going to create or we're going to make a copy of and use a material instance. So before we do this step, let's go and create that. So I'm going to go back to my content browser and I'm going to go into my editor folder here. And it's these 2 files that we're going to build. So first off, this one. So you can do file, right click and do new material. I called mine m_icon. It's pretty simple. It is a material domain is a user interface. Blend mode is translucent. Okay. So we want to create a texture sample. And the input of the texture sample, so off the texture, we want a parameter texture object, right? So that should just be a texture object parameter, right? And we want to set its texture to our render texture target icon, because our capture component is going to be writing it into here, right? And then this is going to fill our material here that we've got. And then because we've got the inverse alpha, we can pull off the alpha, the 1 minus, and do a 1 minus off of it and throw that into our opacity. And that's why we get, we don't get the background. And it'll be transparent when we use it in a user interface item. Okay, so that's the material. And I called it input texture. And from that, so from that in the content browser, you can right click and create a material instance from it. And you can open that one up. And this input texture, I don't know if this needs to be clicked or not. I don't think it needs to be clicked. Anyways, you'll see basically this. You might not have a little guy in it because if you don't have one, because you haven't built it yet. But it should still say the render texture target icon here. And that's all there is to that. So now back to our icon maker and to where we left off. So we're in step 3 of the on-clicked button for the icon maker, or make icon. So we're going to get the asset tools. And because what we want to do is off that target, or off that return value, we want to duplicate an asset. Okay, so basically just off of here, you just go duplicate asset. And so I want to name it. We've got to give it a name. So I want to give my mesh name. I'm going to prefix it with material instance icon. So MII underscore and then be mesh name. So that's going to be the asset name. And the icon path, I'm going to stuff it into the package path. And then we need to set what the original object was that we're duplicating. So this is my M underscore icon underscore instance. So that's your icon material instance. I promoted that to a variable. I called it the output material instance. I cast it to a material instance. I then have to cast that to a material instance constant so that I can get to the to be able to come off of that to set material instance texture parameter value. And we're going to input the parameter name is going to be our input texture. That's what we called it. And then and we're going to change that value to our output texture. Our output texture was the one that we wrote to disk up here. And it's a global parameter, I guess. I didn't change that. And then we're going to save it, and we're going to save our output material instance, even if it's dirty, or even if it's not dirty. And that's it. So what you end up with is in your in any particular item, like so, what you will have is I'm going to delete these, and I'll delete these. And then I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to delete that. So you'll have this or something to that effect. And in your editor, you should have a custom viewport, your icon maker, your material instance, a sky sphere, a render target, a sky sphere static mesh, and your tile entry widget. And then for your icon maker, right now you will only be able to run it from here to be able to run it. And you will be able to then select your different meshes. So if you, there's some here. So here's a bunch of static meshes. So I can refresh it, and you will be able to now adjust them and create them and find another one and create them. And if you want to use a background with it, you can create, oh, well, that's a good thing I clicked something. Oh, it's going to be renaming. It's going to write right over top of it for the material instance. I'm going to say no. And it probably just didn't create it. I'm going to see what happened. Yeah. This one is, it created the texture. So that's something I want to do is I don't, if use background is true, we don't want to do the material instance because it won't make any sense. Because the one minus of it will basically be a completely blank screen. So let's make that correction. So this material instance, so we want to know if use background, we're going to get that, and we're going to branch from it. And if use background is false, then we want to do the material instance. I should really, I'm gonna do that differently. I'm gonna do a not on here, just so that I have the true side of it actually proceeding. And then this will come down into here. And this I can delete. So if we are using the background, if use background is true, the not of that would be false. And I don't want to do a material instance because it would be pointless because your texture will be fine. But if we do use it, then we'll create the material instance. Let's compile that and save that and go back to here. And we're going to delete all these and we're going to see what happens if we do this again. So I'm going to select all of those, go in here and run. And I'm going to make one, and then I'm going to select that, and I'm going to make it again. And if I go, I'll pick one here, and I'll say no. I'm going to pick this one, and well, that's enough. So in my icon textures, we end up with a material instance of our chamfered cube, right? We've got our texture of our chamfered cube, right? We did one with the background. It showed up like this, only because the alpha is still turned on in the thing, but it's there. It's probably another way to just have a different material instance maybe so that it shows up what it is. I don't know why it's doing this, to be honest. Welcome again. Okay, so I investigated, I made some changes to deal with, um, I guess, version numbering and also dealing with whether or not we want the background included. And executive can decision, as far as I'm concerned, if you want the background included, we don't need the alpha showing up. And if we don't need the alpha showing up, I'm going to assume that either if your system needs material instances, that you're capable enough to create the material instance type, and you could put it in here or whatever. Or if you're using the background images as part of it anyways, you're probably just using the texture straight up because it's there, and that's perfectly valid for UI elements. Um, and so what I'm gonna do in here is just have it halt at the texture, but it's not going to include, or it's going to compress out the alpha. At least I believe it is. And so that's one thing. And then the other problem was that when we were creating a material instance, if we did more than one with the same item, we were getting a crash because of some versioning numbers, like the file already existed and then it would die. So I've made the following changes to make a system that I think is pretty good. So the changes are, I've created two integer values, one called version, and I started it with a default value of 1, and one for version alpha, so version A, and it also has a default value of 1. So at the point of selection, when you click on the item in the tile view, whether it's a skeletal mesh or a static mesh, at the completion of getting the mesh name, I reset those version 1 and version alpha both to 1. Version to 1 and version alpha to 1. Okay, because we're starting over the process because we just selected a new So step tile. 1, coming off of our on-clicked button, our step 0 here, is checking to see if we're using the background. If we are using the background, in other words, we're true, we're going to grab our texture target from our custom viewport, and we're going to use the compression settings of HDR compressed, RGB. So we're not gonna use the alpha. Okay, so we're not going to collect it. If we are not using the background, we're going to use interface 2D because that gives us the RGBA. And I think those are the best two choices to use. There's other lower bit quality ones, but I think these are both higher quality bit ones. Even though this one compresses it, it's unnoticeable because it's just removing the alpha channel, which doesn't need to be there. At least I think that's all it's doing. Anyways, promoting that to a variable called compression setting, and then we're setting compression setting to these different values depending on whether we're using the background or not. Okay, so then you can copy, well, I'll just continue on. So that's one thing. The other thing is I'm going to build the file name inside this little function. So this function is called make no alpha file name. So this is going to be the file name when there's no alpha. So in other words, we're using the background. And so we're going to start with the mesh name. And I'm appending underscore NA for no alpha. I'm going to get my version alpha number, and I'm going to throw it in there as a string. I'm going to append that. And then we're going to prefix with our texture. right? You can do this in different order, doesn't matter. That will then set that as our mesh version name. And then I'm going to append the save icon path to the front of that, and we're going to output that. Okay. And then, so that's coming out of this here. Then we're going to ask the system, hey, does this file already exist? And if it does, we're going to increment our version A integer and do it again. And we're going to come back through and see if it's there. And we're going to come back through and we're going to see if it's there until we get to a version number that's not in our path. And then we'll drop out and we'll drop into the next part of the section. Similarly, if this is make file name. In other words, I got rid of the word no alpha, I think. Yeah, those are the two. So make file name and make no alpha file name. So this one starts with the mesh name, right? We append our version number. Oh, I see a little difference here, which I might want to change. And then we append our template prefix. We set that as our mesh version name. We add our save icon path and we output. And then we ask, does that exist? In other words, I don't want the background, but maybe I've been here before on a couple of different other items and I've been doing stuff. Well, if it is, increase our version number and try again. Step 2 captures the scene. We've already set the texture target stuff up there, so we don't need to check the Boolean again. Step 3, or then 2. So we want to create our static texture array. We're going to just plug in our compression strings or our compression settings that we've set above. And we're going to build our mesh version name with our save icon path, right? Because we know that this works now. And we're going to stuff it in here. And we carry on and we don't need to do this last part here. That was a thing. I don't need to do anything here. So that will output and save our asset because we know it doesn't already exist. Last step. This is a chain. This is where we're doing the material instance. So this is where only doing this if we are not using the background. If we're not using the background, then we are going to get our mesh version name. We are prepending it with, or prefixing it with our MII. And here's our icon path. It's based on our icon instance and nothing else changes here, and we save our asset. So how does that work? Well, that's just compile. I deleted some stuff there. And save, and I'm going to go into here. My texture directory is empty. I'm going to get these bunch of selections here just because they're an interesting collection. And I'll go back here and I'll run it. And I'll just do one here first. I will make a regular one. I'll flip over to the content browser up to our icons. And so we got our material instance for our texture static mesh chamfer cube 1. Here's our texture static mesh chamfer cube 1. And that's what we got. If I click it again, then I get cube 2. Okay. If I come to this one, or actually if I go back to this one, I click it again, I'll get texture cube 3, right? And now if I want to use the background and I click it, well, now I just get a texture. It's my no alpha texture, right? So we get the nice visible there. And yeah, so I can go to a different one. I can pick that one. That's going to be the first instance of it. I can do another one. That's a number 2. I can turn it off and do a couple more, right? We can come back to this one and we can not use the background, right? And so that is number 4. We did a few times there. Chamfer cube 4 and chamfer cube 4. There we go. And so that's pretty good. The only thing I just noticed was, you know, maybe I should figure a way to not have it add a value at the end. I'm going to leave this to you if you want to do that. Or if you want to, because if you notice on the texture only ones, we have that _1, _2, because the non-alpha's got underscores on either side of it. So maybe we do a underscore addition in here so that the one is always separated. That kind of keeps it a little bit cleaner because it means that SM chamfer cube was the actual file name, and because we could make a duplicate, like if I go into here and if I duplicate this, doink, I got chamfer cube 1, right? And now with that selected, and if I refresh and I use that, and I click that one, and I go back to here, what do we got? Well, we got chamfer cube 11. See, that's no good because it's really chamfer cube 1 _1. So I'm going to definitely add that in. And I'm going to go do that right now. And you can watch me. It's really easy. We'll just go into this make file name. So we start with the mesh name. And what we wanted to do was we want to append. And we're going to append just an underscore. And we're going to stuff that into there. And that'll be the difference. Compile, save. And now if I come back out here, I'm going to, I don't want to risk a dumb error here. I'll do that. And then I'm going to come into our prototyping. And yeah, I'll select that one too. So we have both examples. We'll go here. We'll run our widget. And I'll start with cube. I'll start with the regular one. I'll start with the regular one. Click it. Go back to our content browser. And there we go. So that looks better. So now it's very clear of where it came from. Click and then click. And if I come and do this one, click, we get the chamfer cube 1/1-1. And this way it works as well because it already had that done. Good. I like that a lot. So the last step is going to be something that you're going to want to do, because what if you had all these selected and you don't want to go and find this thing? You just want to right click and you want to open your icon maker. Click. That's what you want to do. So that's what we're going to do in the last video. It's a small bit of C++, continuing on from the command, the creation where we created the thumbnail to texture, and you know, which still does its thing, right? So yeah, that's this one here. I don't know why they don't always refresh, but it's, you know, it's there. I don't know why it doesn't refresh right away, but yeah. Anyways, and then there'll be a couple other things I want to show you about this thumbnail creator when we get there. But thanks a lot. Like and subscribe. I will continue to make this a little bit better.